Hey YouTube, Joeboy here. Yeah, I don't think that there's enough videos talking about Mad Monk Arouge. I can't be the only person that is interested in what the heck this guy is gonna do. Or, the point of him. But the reason this is a thought in my mind is we are in Egghead and we have Jewelry Bonnie. She is here and it is very clear that Bonnie is going to play some sort of big role in this or later. And it kind of like checks off the last supernova that we have aside from Arouge. Arouge is the last supernova that we honestly haven't spent any time with. And that is conspicuous by nature. But he has to have some role to play, right? As they say, you save your best for last, right? Maybe, maybe not, but I've got an idea that could make Arouge one of the most important supernova in the story. Certainly much more important than our guys Basil Hawkins and Apu, right? So let's make a connection between Arouge and Joeboy. We said this sometime recently, but I think that Oda had an idea in mind to sort of design and define all of the supernova. They represent certain aspects of the story or themes, whatever. Like Apu is related to music, Pone is related to the underworld and gangs, Basil Hawkins is fate. And we won't get into all of these, but I think that understanding this helps us understand the character, so I'd like to do the same for Arouge, and honestly I think it's pretty easy. It's kind of given away by his epithet, the Mad Monk. A monk is a religious figure, and Arouge is a religious character. And believe it or not, religion has a role to play in the story. This is actually true in a couple ways, some of which are subtle and not really related to this theory or this video at all, but we've made videos a long time in the past of One Piece essentially being a parable story to represent Buddhism. And in an incredibly subtle way, the story of One Piece teaches Buddhism. And I use this term very lightly. But Buddhism is about the pursuit of truth, becoming enlightened, and you do this by experiencing the world, accomplishing your dreams. As a Buddhist, you believe in karma, which means what you do with your life in this life matters. And although it's not expressed right, you can tell that the Strats are living their best life, trying to do good. In essence, you can see how the Strats as a whole, and Luffy in particular, as the story progresses, become more enlightened. These philosophical beliefs, which Oda may or may not believe in, certainly is prevalent where he is from, sort of shape the journey. And at the end of the day, Buddhists believe in reincarnation. And so from this, you get some of the coolest concepts in One Piece, how the D smile before they die, and the idea of inherited will. But for now, let's avoid connections between the One Piece story and real religions or beliefs that exist within the real world. Ultimately, what is actually happening in the story, self-contained, is far more important. In my mind, religion is inexorably connected to faith. Faith is, I think, integral to all religions. And faith is absolutely a huge part of the story. You really need not look further than the Strat crew itself and the way that they treat each other and their captain. They believe that Luffy will become the king of the pirates. When things get bad, they believe that Luffy will win his fight. And Luffy himself believes that he will accomplish what he has set out to do in the way that he wants to do it. All of this is faith. You can argue that they have tangible reasons, scientific reasons to believe these things because Luffy, throughout the story, consistently wins, right? He has no reason to doubt himself. But there's certain circumstances where it's not clear how it's possible for them to succeed. This is highlighted in the story, specifically in Wano, in verse Kaido. And when things seem so uncertain, that's usually when Oda makes sure that the Strats express their faith. And this faith is actually important. It helps the Strats continue forward, even as the skies turn black. They may not know the hows or the whys or the specifics, but what they believe will come to pass. But let's sidestep this for a moment. It's an interesting question of where Arouge is from. And I think that we can actually figure this out based on his wings. I'm sure that a lot of people out there have watched videos about the winged races, so this may not be new to you, but it's important to point out. There are at least 3 distinct tribes of sky people. You have the Shandians, which lived in Jaya before Jaya was blown up back into the sky, and they reunited with the Skypians. But we learn from cave art in Enel's cover story as Enel attempts to and actually visits the moon, right? We see their story of how they came from the moon to the blue sea, and there's a third group, the Burkans. And the Burkans are actually depicted differently than both the Shandians and the Skypians, mainly in the style of their wings. And if you look at the cave art of the style of the Burkans' wings, and you look at Aruge's wings, you'll notice a similarity, which leads me to speculate that Aruge is a Burkan. So from this, you can actually get a rough history here for Aruge. There's another Sky Island. It's a small detail, but it exists. There's another Sky Island very near Skypiea, just before we got to the Sky Island arc. This island was called Burka, named after the city on the moon that all of these tribes were originally from. Enel was originally from Burka, and he destroyed this Sky Island. Aruge's pirate crew is called the Fallen Monk Pirates, and it is my belief that as Enel destroyed Burka, Aruge literally fell to the blue sea. Interesting wordplay aside, I think that you should take this literally. Aruge is a monk, and they literally fell. And this is certainly possible because we have seen this play out in the present timeline already with Gidatsu. This guy, if you've forgotten who this is, yeah, he fought Chopper, got sucked into his own cloud. Next thing you know, he's in a cover story in the blue sea digging holes. So all of this at this point should be straightforward. We, I think, essentially know where Aruge is from, and he states what his title was, what his job was likely there. He was a monk. But this is kind of an important question not a lot of people ask. If Aruge is a monk, some sort of religious priest, what is it that he actually believes? These two things obviously go hand in hand. A religious figure needs a religion. This is actually not as complicated as you would think that it is, at least on one hand. We've already compared Aruge to Gidatsu who fell from the Sky Islands. Gidatsu was a priest subservient to God Enel. Actually, a detail that is easy to miss if you're just watching the anime or reading the manga is all of Enel's priests are all from Burka. The same place that he is from, the same place that we speculate Aruge is from. This potentially fills in some gaps of Aruge's story as well. We know that priests were subservient to Enel, and Enel became god. I would presume that Enel was first god of Burka before he destroyed it, and then became god of Skypiea. It's also worth noting that before Enel even arrived, the Skypians, their leader, was also referred to as god. And to take this one step further, when we get introduced to the Shandians who separated and initially arrived on the Blue Sea, they also worship a god. Because of the shared origins of these three groups all being originally from the moon, I would presume that this is a relic of the past. The winged people have always been ruled by a god, a sort of religious figure who also plays the role of their king. There are several ways that you could speculate this, and obviously my opinion will shine through here because we don't know for certain. It's possible that Aruge was actually loyal to a servant of Enel and simply fell and didn't travel with the other Burkans to Skypiea because he was no longer on the Sky Islands. Honestly, this would be wild by itself, that the whole time Aruge is trying to find and return to Enel. That would certainly make it interesting if Enel were to return to the story. But I don't really think that this is true personally. I like the speculation that it's possible Aruge was actually the god before Enel in Burka, similar to Gonfall. Or if this isn't true, then Aruge opposed Enel's ascent to godhood in Burka and essentially fought him and lost. But I want to linger on this for a moment, this shared origin of all the winged people, how although they're in different places since leaving the moon, they all have similarities still to this day. Religion is often, if not always, rooted in the past. When you see and look around the world, the real world today, at what people believe, right, the origins of it is almost always from the distant past. So this makes me wonder who the original god was, who inspired this religion, which lasts to this day among the winged people. Who was the first god? Well guys, my answer to this, and this will make more sense as we continue the video, my answer to this is that the original god of the sky people, of the winged people, is the sun god, Nika. By far the most defining attribute of Aruj that is really fascinating given this speculation is that you hardly ever see Aruj not smiling in the story. But there are times where the smile slips, and it is very clear that this is something that Aruj is intentionally doing. And I suspect it has something to do with his religious beliefs. That is to say that Aruj believes in Joy Boy. The smile that he always wears is reflective of his god. And I personally like to believe that while Aruj was in Burka, he was the god of Burka, because his powers are reminiscent of Joy Boy. He does not have the sun god fruit like Luffy does, but his powers are very similar to something Luffy demonstrates throughout the story. The more damage he takes, the more experiences that he accumulates, the stronger he gets. So this, in combination with Aruj always smiling, makes me see him as a knock-off Joy Boy. Similar, but not the real thing. But we also know that the Sun God is a product of a devil fruit. I mean, Luffy is supposed to be Joy Boy, right? Well, the thing that Luffy and Joy Boy probably have in common is the same devil fruit, the Sun God Nika. And I think that it is likely that the people of Burka worshipped an incredibly powerful devil fruit user, Enel. I find it noteworthy that with Joy Boy, you hear of the drums of liberation, and with Enel, he has, for some reason, implanted drums onto his back. Is this just another coincidence, or is it a clue? But we're not just looking at Burka, the sky island that Enel destroyed 6 years before the beginning of the story. Burka from the moon is a time capsule which contains history not well known, but certainly that we as readers can learn from. And it's fascinating to me that when Enel arrives to the moon, it's obviously abandoned, it's desolate, it is no longer inhabitable. But Enel's devil fruit abilities power the city. With present events in the story, it should remind you of the Eternal Flame. From this, I believe it makes it reasonable to speculate that the Eternal Flame might have something to do with a devil fruit, such as the Sun God Nika fruit. It plants this idea in my head that devil fruits are power sources. But anyway, we made a theory a long time ago, which I still like to this day, that essentially speculates that the Goro no Mi, Enel's devil fruit, is a relic of the Sky Peoples, that essentially this devil fruit existed on the moon when the civilization lived on Burka from the moon. And as they left to go to the blue star, the blue planet, they took the devil fruit with them. But it's just really unlikely for a devil fruit to spawn in these Sky Islands. So any devil fruits which actually exist in the Sky Islands among the winged races, in my opinion, are more likely just to have always existed within these peoples. We know that as a devil fruit user dies, the fruit spawns on some kind of nearby fruit-bearing tree. Yeah, so the fruit can stay in one location, especially as isolated as the Sky People are. So essentially, this is some headcanon that the Sky People have always worshipped a devil fruit user. Devil fruit user was their god, and this may have originally been Joy Boy. Certainly, Aruj's smile makes this an interesting conversation. He wears it as if it's part of his doctrine. And just like any other religion or doctrine, prophecies exist about Joy Boy, not just related to Sky People, but elsewhere. So Joy Boy as a character or as an ability being foundational to some sort of religious beliefs makes a lot of sense. But I'm sure that at this point people will have questions of, well, you assume that they were ruled by a devil fruit user, but you also said that they had the Goro no Mi, Enel's devil fruit, in the past. It's what powered their country. So that was their original god, was it not? The idea in my mind, and we'll find out, right? But we see that in the present storyline, allies of Joy Boy were often sent to very obscure protected places. We have the fishmen under the sea, Tantata hidden in the forest, Minx on top of Zoe. Well, it just so happens that we recently learned that the past was highly advanced. Advanced enough for space travel? Maybe. Did a race end up on the moon because of Joy Boy? Maybe. Afterwards, Joy Boy would of course have left, but in the minds of the people that were there, he is their deity. Well, let's switch this up a little bit. You guys know we've done a lot of videos talking about all of the parallels within the story. Oda does this constantly. It seems to be his mindset, just generally. It'd probably take too many words to explain this, so I won't. But I think intuitively, I think a lot of people will enjoy this idea anyway. Luffy, the sun god, the Nika Nika fruit, is a devil fruit that is very related to the concept of dreams. Now, Luffy literally transforms the world around him based on his imagination. He inspires dreams, maybe even fulfills them. This is true both literally and thematically. And it's cool to think that Imu is his foil, that where Luffy and Nika and dreams are so interconnected, Imu is related to nightmares. Luffy is to desire what Imu is to fear. I want you to hold this thought for just a second, okay? We learn from the Shandians that the snake Nola isn't their only god, as they have this sacrificial ceremony. In Nolan and Kagra's flashback, they mention god of the sun, probably Nika, god of the sea and the forest and the earth, something like that. To them, there isn't just one god, they're polytheistic. And there's a detail from chapter 297 in One Piece that nobody discusses, and that is the fact that the Skypians are also polytheistic. We see Conus, near the defeat of Enel, pray to the gods. And from the context, it's clear that she is not praying to Gonfall or to Enel. She believes in gods, plural. We've already established that there's a connection between all the winged races, and then we've tied it to their past. I like to believe that all the winged races believe in more than one god, even if one god is their king, and stands above the others. And if their one god is a devil fruit or a devil fruit user, then I would presume that the others are the same. Or at least were considered this once upon a time. That is to say that 1,000 years or more before the beginning of the story, and we get to the origins of the religions that Aruj, Birkins, Skypians, and Shandians hold today, all centered around devil fruit users. This makes you think differently about the Shandians' ceremony and the god of the sun and the god of the earth, the god of storms and rain, maybe who these gods originally were, even if it is long forgotten. So now I want to point to something interesting that Enel said. Enel said that people do not fear God. Fear is God itself. At this point, we have hypothesized the past of Aruj, that Aruj was a priest in Burka, and that Aruj may have been the god of Burka before Enel, or maybe at least a candidate. Aruj always smiles. It's something that seems very important for him to do. Enel does not. I find it incredibly unlikely that Aruj the priest believes that God is fear itself. If I were to speculate, I would say that Aruj believes that God is joy, and this is why he always smiles. So you have Enel who believes that fear is God, and Aruj who believes that joy is God, having a huge battle in the city of Burka, which is totally annihilated. I presume that you understand what this is implying. Parallels, they are everywhere. I believe that the past conflict of Burka between Enel and Aruj sets up the future conflict between Luffy and Joy Boy. Dreams and joy versus nightmare and fear. The winner of this battle becomes God. The stakes are the annihilation of the entire world. But if you actually sit down and think about this, this opens an enormous can of worms. The reason is because all three winged people were originally from the moon, and they traveled to the Blue Sea, but we have a rough timeline of when this occurred. And basically, it is incredibly likely that the Shandians were already on the Blue Sea by the time that Joy Boy, the figure that we know of from history, who was active during the Void Century, they were already on the Blue Sea by the time that this character became important, likely before this character consumed the Nika Nika Devil Fruit. Which means at this point in time, the Skypians and the Birkins were isolated in these Sky Islands. Yet their religion might be based around Joy Boy. Guys, basically what I'm saying is that their shared beliefs, their possible worship of a god, the sun god Nika, predates Joy Boy. Or at the very least predates Joy Boy from the Void Century. That is to say that this is potentially evidence that there has been more than one other Joy Boy. Luffy today, Joy Boy from the Void Century, and others before them. You guys already know that I'm a huge fan of cyclical history within the story of One Piece. I just think that, we've had a lot of videos talking about it. We're not going to do so a lot today. But like, for instance, the powers of Poseidon are inherited over, hundreds of years. Luffy is Joy Boy, somehow the same character from the past because he awakens his devil fruit sort of thing. And largely society goes through these same sorts of changes where somebody becomes a god and it defines an age or an era, and these gods grow corrupt slowly over time until they're dethroned, and then new gods emerge. And I like to think that it's basically the same thing happening over and over again. So like, technology today is only now nearing what technology once was during the Void Century. I like to think, well, technology during the Void Century was only nearing what once was 1,000 years before that, when there was another climactic battle between dreams and nightmares, between Nika and potentially Imu. This is just another thing related to Buddhism, breaking the cycle. In the case of Buddhists, they believe there's this cycle of rebirth, but the rebirth eventually ends once you have reached enlightenment, which the Strats, that's their journey. Like, we've already gone through that, right? The pursuit of knowledge and experiences takes someone and will eventually, no matter how long it takes, lead them to nirvana. It's all very fitting. Cyclical history is also very fitting when it comes to Norse mythology. Norse mythology is the mythology of Vikings, and the essential idea here that you need to understand is that the Vikings believed in gods, and they believed that the gods must fall. And this is something foretold. This happens during Ragnarok, which precedes a great void in which nothing remains. The world, for all intents and purposes, dies. The gods fall and die, defeated by chaos. And then eventually the world is reborn, a little bit better than it was before. This occurs in cycles, repeating forever. But of course, Norse mythology is related to Elbaf. The giants of Elbaf are Vikings, right? And it is in Elbaf that I suspect that Aruj will reintroduce himself and play his role. A subtle clue to this may actually be found in the name of Aruj's speculated home island, Burka. Burka was a Viking hub. You guys know that I've been on this theory train for quite a long time. It's something that I believe in my soul, but we see in Skypiea Giant Jack. Giant Jack is a beanstalk, and it's just everywhere in Skypiea. But Giant Jack is this giant vine, and it must originate from somewhere. But where? The theory is that when we get to Elbaf, Oda will use the fable, Elbaf spelled backwards is fable, use the fable of Jack and the giant beanstalk. In that fable, a person climbs giant beanstalk, and at the top, giants, living up in the clouds. It's a really incredibly fitting fable to use in the arc of Elbaf. But of course, it's Oda's story, and he'll twist it as he sees fit. So it's not that you climb a giant beanstalk to get up to the giants that live in the sky. Instead, you have Treasure Tree Adam. Treasure Tree Adam, which is very, very likely to be on Elbaf. When we see Elbaf, we can see there is some large tree there. The speculation is that this tree is so tall it extends up into the sky, tall enough to interact with the Sky Islands, which naturally form. These Sky Islands extend all along Treasure Tree Adam's branches, so far that you can get to Skypiea, which is all the way in the New World, quite a distance away. Also, around this tree, Treasure Tree Adam, is a beanstalk Giant Jack, which we see in Skypiea. As you would expect of a vine, it wraps around the tree and the branches. And in this case, it has grown a little bit farther than the tree itself, supported by the White Sea. So basically, all of the Sky Islands are connected. This is actually alluded to in the Skypiea arc itself, because when the Strats arrive, Gonfal's like, wait, you took the knock-up stream up here? There's a normal way that people usually get here. And he calls it the Path of High West, something like that. And we made a video a long time ago explaining how the Path of High West would mean Elbaf and Treasure Tree Adam. That's the normal way, because all the islands are connected. So we have Aruj argued to be from Burka of the Sky Islands, if ever he wanted to return home. The way to do it is through Elbaf, for him to be reintroduced in the story when the Sky Islands are potentially brought up once again post-time skip would make a lot of sense. And frankly, we just don't have too much story left for Aruj to actually do anything. Like, you can debate me and you can argue maybe Aruj isn't that important because some of the supernovas simply haven't been. But he's got to show up. There's no way that his defining moment is going to be watching Kaido fall, right? No, he's going to do something more than that, for sure. In order to do that, he needs to be present, and again, limited arcs left. Elbaf is next. That's my money. And along with this is just hope that I have. We actually don't know. I really like the theory that the Sky Islands actually do connect back to Treasure Tree Adam. In fact, this path of High West has to exist, but that doesn't necessarily mean the story will focus on it. So I really do hope that when we visit Elbaf, we climb the tree itself. You know, that's not necessarily a guarantee. You just don't know. And I have many theories actually about this, but specifically about Nami potentially being royalty originally from the Sky Islands surrounding this, also where Loki lives, not at the bottom in the village of Elbaf, but at the top of the tree, your metaphorical Asgard. Again, the giants of Elbaf are based on and seem to represent Norse mythology. One of the biggest concepts in Norse mythology is the world tree, right? Treasure Tree Adam playing the role of the world tree. On the branches of the world tree are different tribes sort of thing. You guys can go off. I really hope we get something like that because that would be some of the best world building in the entire series, no doubt. But yeah, the theory is that when Nami visits the Sky Islands, like, she immediately picks up a waiver and just knows how to write it. She also has just intuition about weather. And this is another fun fact for you, but the wizard from Weatheria that Nami visited during the time skip, he's from Burka. I mean, the layers here are absolutely insane, but for there to be like a lineage of weather experts that live up in the sky, that's where Nami is originally from, and somehow maybe there's prejudice against giants, against humans up in the sky, which led to Nami's circumstance and, you know, her parents not being with her. Oh my god, like, please. But regarding all of this, we will of course see. But with Aruj, for him to return during Elbaf, with all of these things, makes a lot of sense to me. And then the question is what is Aruj going to do? What is the point of him? And anticlimactic or not, I feel like we've already expressed this. Aruj and the Birkins themselves are carriers of history. If it's true that they believed in Joy Boy, or the Sun God, before they traveled to the Blue Sea, before Joy Boy as we know him from the Void Century existed, then they're a time capsule. While the Void Century was largely erased from everywhere, the Birkins continued on, isolated in the sky, forgotten as they themselves faded into myth, spreading the prophecies of Joy Boy. Essentially, guys, Aruj is world building. He establishes the One Piece world in a greater universe beyond just the last 800 years. I would argue that no other character in the story can possibly do what he might be able to do. And it would be natural for him to share this knowledge as well because Luffy is Joy Boy. He is the Sun God. He has consumed the Nika Nika no Mi, and if Aruj has any thoughts to this whatsoever, we will discover them. Honestly, I see Aruj as an ally. Although they may fight, Luffy might have to prove who he is. And I think that Aruj can also play a role of expertise. He is from the Sky Islands. Having him around to instruct them about how to climb the tree or how to act once they arrive there, that's things that Aruj could know. I also just aesthetically like the idea of Aruj with the giants of Elbaf on top of the tree. Aruj's powers, make him grow to the size, perhaps, of a giant. To actually see that in an arc, I mean, why wouldn't you do that? But yeah, I suppose at this point in the theory you guys get it, right? And I hope that it makes sense to you. I guess we need some sort of conclusion here. So I'm sure that you guys already know that Luffy is the chosen one. He is the boy of prophecy. His coming has been foretold, and Luffy will likely save the world. My initial intention or plan with this video was to include references to other religions that exist, specifically talking about Christianity and Jesus Christ, that Luffy resembles Jesus. Jesus likewise is this person of prophecy. His coming was foretold. Similar to Luffy, Luffy died, it seemed like, before he arose and became Joy Boy perhaps similar to how Jesus resurrected on the third day. Jesus is also supposed to save the world. They say he died for our sins. And also, just the same as Joy Boy, they say he is supposed to return. Now, I'm not really saying that Luffy is literally Jesus, because there are many beliefs in the world, and a lot of beliefs are convergent and there's similarities everywhere. This is the one that I'm most familiar with. But there is subtle symbolism to Christianity within the story. Look at someone like Dracula Mihawk, who literally wears a cross. And he is not alone in doing so. It makes me think that Oda's thinking a little bit about religion with the story of One Piece. As we've already argued, faith is important. Luffy has similarities to Jesus, and Luffy's disciples, his crew, all have faith in him. They believe in him. And this belief, time and time again, is rewarded. That symbolism, in some large or small way, matters. But my conclusion to all this really is simple. Joy Boy, the sun god Nika, is a literal religious figure, sharing the tropes of religious figures. I said this on Twitter, but I want to share this here. I'm watching the One Piece live action right now, and one of the things that I absolutely love about the live action, Luffy is a little bit different in that show, but in a way that is very captivating to me, because I'm watching it and I'm seeing something that I didn't see when I first started the story, where Luffy comes across as a disguised deity, like an ancient myth or fable, where a group of people are walking along the road and they encounter an old man, and the old man asks for some change or asks for some sort of favor, and if you do that, then you get rewarded because that old man was actually a god. The encounter was a test, and it was also fate. Essentially, our adventurers were deemed worthy. Likewise, in the live action, Luffy reminds me of a kind of mischievous god spirit. To maybe take this back to Norse mythology, there's aspects of Luffy that remind me of a character like Loki, which makes me all the more interested to visit the actual Loki character in Elbaf, an arc which we're pretty much now speculating might have themes relating to faith and religion. But really the whole point of this theory, if you boil it down to its simplest aspect, it's really that Aruj kind of represents this part of the story that we're really just now maybe getting into, especially once the prophecies of Joy Boy are revealed, which is likely sooner rather than later. I definitely believe that as we learn more about the Void Century and Joy Boy and the Nika Nika, it'll all just justify more Luffy as the Chosen One, and what that means. I just want to make it abundantly clear that these aspects are already here, and there isn't a better character in the story to clarify them other than our guy, the Mad Monk, Aruj. But the reason that I bring this up isn't because it's most definitely true. The reason is to get brain cells firing because Aruj is likely going to be in the story soon. I think very probably going to be Elbaf. He's going to do something, and there's lots of ideas. So I'm curious as to what thoughts you might have. Share them in the comment section below. Remember to check out my book of the Booms. Volume 1 and 2 is out. Volume 3 is scheduled for release on October 4th, and I will let you guys know when there's links for pre-order. Guys, straight up, this is my magnum opus. I'm so proud of this. It is very good. Obviously, if you read Volume 1 and 2, you'll have an idea of the general tone of the story and things like that, whether it's subjectively you like it, but I think that it is incredible, and Volume 3 will absolutely be the cherry on the top. So self-promotion, I get it. I really do think this. It should start slow and get nothing but better from here to the end. It's kind of how I feel about One Piece as well. Obviously, never a better time to start than now. If you haven't, or if you've already read Volume 2, be very excited. And as always, if you do happen to read it, just let other people know. Leave a review. I spend my whole life critiquing and analyzing stories and art, right? So I love to hear from you guys as well. So with that being said, like the video, subscribe, click the bell to be notified, join the squad, and as always, guys, have a wonderful day.